Okay, good evening, everyone. It is 9 o'clock, 9:01, and welcome back to another episode of Mondays with Moshe. Tonight, we are so privileged and honored to have Dr. Sue Johnson, founder of EFT. We don't even know what that stands for yet, but we're going to find out soon. And Dr. Johnson is an innovator and a really trailblazer in bringing emotional focused therapy and the emotion-based work to the therapy room. And she is going to enhance our understanding of therapy and of EFT. Some of us who aren't so familiar with EFT will get a taste of it. Hopefully there will be those of us who are here who will eventually pursue learning and training in EFT. And what I'm excited to announce is that EFT is not couples therapy. It's also couples therapy, but it's not couples therapy.
That's right.
Okay, and we're going to hear more about that tonight, hopefully. I do want to remind everybody that you're more than welcome to ask questions or say comments, and Sue will be happy to answer them, and I'm happy to facilitate. I just will request that you please use the raise your hand tab on the bottom right of your screen, and this way I'll unmute you. I'll see that you're raising your hand and you'll be unmuted. And of course, we want to keep any confidential, private information discreet. Please don't bring anything in here that may be shared with others, because this is going to be shared with, we are almost at 800 participants on our Google group on Mondays with Moshe. And, word can get out. So just be mindful of what you say and try not to disclose any information. Thank you for those who are applauding in the background, Dr. Eisdorfer. Okay. Again, it's great to see everybody. Always nice to see the new faces that join, and of course the familiar faces. I think we're gonna have a really nice crowd tonight. We're already 2-3 minutes in, and we have over 60 participants. I think let's see if we can get close to when Irv Yalom was on and Dick Schwartz was on. Let's see if we can break some new records now that we have new participants. Okay, anyway, Dr. Sue Johnson, thank you again. This is such an honor to have you on.
You're most welcome.
And can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you became so emotionally focused?
Well, it depends where you want to start. What I usually say.
We only have an hour and a quarter. So.
Yes, yeah, right. But really, what I talk about in the book that I wrote for the public, that is the easiest way into EFT, called Hold Me Tight, right, which is about our couples work, is I say that it started with me growing up in a pub. And in those days, little working class girls, you weren't taught to go away and play with your toys, you were given a job. So my job was to stand on a stool behind the bar and dry glasses and put them up on the shelf. So as a child, which these days we would probably think is very inappropriate, I stood on a stool. I didn't watch TV shows or, I stood on a stool and watched adults in a pub, which was really a community center, okay? I watched adults joke and flirt and play and argue and fight and have mini panic attacks and the whole gamut. And so I watched all these emotional dramas. And I think in general, the thing I learned, although I couldn't put this together until much later, is I learned to listen to the emotional music that was going on. And I learned to tune into that, which is the basic thing you do in EFT. And I learned to look at patterns. I learned to look at the dance. And I saw that the emotional music organized the dance between people, and the dance between people organized the emotional music. And so when I started seeing couples, which is sort of halfway through my doctorate, I had done everything else. I'd done families, I'd done groups, I'd done individual. And I started seeing couples under a lot of pressure, because the place I went to said, oh, everyone's sick and you've got quite a lot of experience, so you really only have to see 2 couples. But guess what? You're here for 2 days, so you're seeing couples on the hour, every hour for the whole of the 2 days. And I said, no problem, because I was very silly. And then these couples walked into the room and I was blown away. I thought, oh, whoa, wait a minute. I mean, there's these huge dramas unfolding. And, you know, I think my implicit knowledge from the pub helped me, but I was overwhelmed instantly. And I went to the library. I thought somebody knows all about love, intimacy, how to help couples. You know, I read about communication skills. Well, my couples didn't want to do communication skills. They do them if I insisted, and then they'd immediately revert back to the way they usually interacted. I read about insight. I read about things like collusion and projective identification. And I thought, hell, nobody knows how to do this. So what am I going to do? So I started taping my couples and watching them until I was blue. And what is very interesting about that is that is exactly what John Bowlby did, the father of attachment theory. And I'll talk more about how EFT is a attachment science-based intervention, whether you're doing individual, couple, or family therapy. You know, John Bowlby, when he wanted to understand the most important human interactions between people, the interactions that shape who we are and our emotional architecture, what he did was he set up to watch mothers and children in the strange situation. And he said, what happens when a mother leaves? What happens when a mother comes back? And from that observation, he developed this amazing, broad, profound, with thousands of studies behind it, only really applied to adults in the last decade. He developed this incredible understanding of human beings. So, you know, I wasn't particularly imitating him, but I feel like my couples taught me how to do EFT, just like we've always done individual therapy, but now we're focusing on that. And the primer for emotionally focused individual therapy, EFIT, came out 2 weeks ago with Routledge. So I hope some folks will take a look at it and tell me if they like it. You can tell me if you don't like it too as well, actually. I'm always interested. But, you know,
so can I just ask you about that? Do you think that, you know, I understand your background in observing couples standing in the pub and drying glasses. I hope the glasses actually dried. Couples can be really fascinating to observe. But do you think that you had a particular propensity to observing and watching human behavior, or do you think this would have happened to anyone who was standing in your shoes?
I'm not sure. I do know that I think as a child, I picked up on emotional cues very fast. I think, to be honest, we're having fun here, we're talking, so, you know, I'm just going to assume we're all friends. To be honest, some of that was because my mother was amazingly dangerous. She was the most dominant human being I've ever met in my life.
So you were forced to become attuned to feelings.
Absolutely, I was forced to become attuned, and you had to know how to deal with my mom, or you were what were you? You were like dominated into the ground. Okay, so she taught me a lot, and she made me puzzle over things that I still say to myself when I watch an individual, a couple, or a family. What is happening here? What is happening here? What is the emotional music these people are dancing to? What is the dance that is creating the emotional music? And how are people getting stuck in this so that they constantly reproduce the same thing? And it ends up with them constantly viewing themselves in a particular way and having, if things are negative, a constricted sense of who they are.
Yeah, and I can imagine you standing in the pub and being particularly intrigued by observing adaptive communication, such as playfulness and flirting and things like that were more adaptive than what you were accustomed to in a domineering mother.
Oh yes, and the other part of this was my father, who was the most amazing man, especially when you understand that he grew up in a small village. He had very little education. He ran away to the Navy. He lied about his age when he was about 15. And I don't know where he got it from, but he had the most amazing sense of emotional balance. He was the safest human being. So I lived with a very dangerous human being and a very safe human being. And he had the ability to create calm in chaos. He had the ability to comfort. You know, in an English pub, I remember a little man used to come in at the same time every night, 6 o'clock. He'd drink the same beer, just one, and he'd say all the same things to my father as he always said. So I remember watching, and I didn't put it together like this, but some part of my brain said, this is not about information. You know, this is not about what they're saying, because they always said the same thing. It was like a, you know, lovely weather, Arthur. Oh, yes, Jim. Yes, isn't it lovely? Yes, it's going to rain. Yes, I think it probably is. I mean, it's like nothing's happening, right? But what I got was this man came in for comfort. This man came in because my father would reach across and put his huge hand on this man's hand and say, nice to see you, Jim. Always nice to see you, right? And the guy would sit there for, 2 hours with one beer, and I would watch my father do this. And for me, he was an amazing father. He would go in and talk to me about my emotions, and he would also zoom out, which is what we do in EFT too. We zoom in, we evoke and prime emotion, and then we help people regulate it, get their balance, and zoom out. And he would talk to me and say, I'd do something like I'd go out late to a party, and he'd say, now, if you had a very precious daughter and you looked at the clock and it was 12 o'clock and she wasn't home, now what do you think would be happening with that? And he had the most amazing ability to teach and hold. He's an incredible man. And this is about attachment. Of course, I still have him. I have him in my heart, in my brain, in my inner representation. He's still a resource for me. And whereas my mother comes up when negative things happen, it's interesting to me that when positive things happen to me, I hear my father's voice. My father's voice always says something like, well done, Poppet, which is what he used to call me, right? And that just makes me warm all over. So what attachment science does in a brilliant, elegant way is it teaches us how relational we are. It teaches us how aloneness is iatrogenic, and it really sort of shows us the link between how we put our life, ourselves together and our emotions, and how we dance with others. And those social interactions, those patterns in social interaction are core to how we learn to regulate our emotions, how we see ourselves, how resilient we are.
Beautiful. One of the things I sometimes tell people, especially when working with couples or with parent-child relationships and dynamics, is that when somebody is talking, what they're really looking for is to be heard. Because
yes,
if they didn't want to be heard, they wouldn't talk.
That's right. And I think, we all know in our hearts that we all need to be seen and we all need to feel safe. I think the thing is that if you understand attachment, you understand not instinctively, but you understand how that ripples out into everybody's life. Attachment is the best theory of the developmental relational theory of personality we have. It tells us who we are. It gives us a map to our basic longings, our basic needs, our basic fears. It tells us the only few ways that we have to deal with those. It tells us our key dramas and interactions with others. It tells us what health looks like. I love attachment because it never lets me down in therapy. I can always, and in EFT, the real art is to tune into your client, follow and track the emotion, know how to make sense of it, stay with your client and take them in and through. And attachment always helps me do that.
Okay. Let's jump into the EFT process in the psychotherapy, in the therapy room. And I'd love to hear, between two spouses or a couple, and between the client or the therapist to the client, how those attachments are created and what EFT is. I just want to remind everyone, for those of you who just joined, we're just about at the 100 participant mark. So congratulations, it's a big milestone. We're at 99, so we need one more person to jump in. Who wants to, does anyone want to do it? Anyone want to be that last person? Okay.
Well, don't I count? Can I be?
You're number one.
Oh, okay, jolly good.
So let's, for those of you who want to ask a question or comment, by all means, just raise your hand on the bottom right of the screen and we will call on you and you can question or comment.
Moshi, maybe I can help folks by sort of describing our kind of main, what we call our macro sequence of interventions. You know, we're experiential therapists, a la Rogers. We're like Rogers on steroids. And we look at patterns just like Mnuchin did, right? But we use attachment as a frame for everything, right? So, and by the way, the other thing is if people want to look, we're amazingly well researched. Lots of psychotherapies say they're very great. Well, my response is, so show me the outcome studies. And we have a fantastic set of outcome studies, not just outcome, but great follow-up. We're doing a huge study on EFT right now. We impact everything, including, we had a huge study where we showed we didn't just change relationships, we impacted people's security of attachment, which is core to your sense of self. So if you want to look at all that, you can go on to www.iceeft.com. You can see our trainings in EFT, our trainings. We have 70 centers all over the world, our trainings in families, in couples, in individuals. There's a huge resource in that site. But I can talk to you about, you know, we look like Rogerian therapists who also focus on patterns and relationships, but I can talk to you about what we call the EFT Tango, which is the basic process. I'll try to give you a kind of a snapshot of it, and then we can play with it if you want.
Yeah, the only thing I want to make sure we cover to begin with is, you know, I don't want to take for granted that we all understand what when we talk about attachment and therapy. I'm hoping that everybody understands the concept of attachment and at least, you know, parent-child attachment. But I don't want to take.
To read it to you. He read it to you?
I don't want to take for granted that we all understand what attachment in therapy is and attachment between therapist and client is. So would you be able to just give us a quick overview so we're all on the same page here?
Yes. What attachment basically says is that your nervous system is not wired for emotional isolation. That basically you're not built to deal with it and it's iatrogenic. That we need to feel seen and safe by at least one other human being in order to have our sense of emotional balance in the world and be able to deal with anxiety with some sort of agency, right? That's what attachment says. And so the EFT therapist will particularly pick up on and focus on aloneness, because when your clients are alone, they will not process their deeper feelings. Bowlby said all clients are struggling with frightening, alien, and unacceptable emotions. People will not really go into those and stay with them and work through them if they don't feel connected. They just won't. So the EFT therapist, and by the way, my son calls it extremely funny therapy, so you can also call it that. The EFT therapist shows up in a very particular way. I'm present with my clients. They call me Sue. I cry with them sometimes. When I'm on Zoom, I say things like, if you look into my face, what can you see? I hope you can see. I feel your sadness. I feel sad with you. I'll say things like, if I was in the room with you right now, I'd reach out and put my hand on your arm. You'd feel the heat of my hand on your arm, and you'd know how I can see how hard this is for you. And when I do that, I use my voice to hold people. If you want to work with emotion, number one rule, slow it down. Emotion isn't irrational, it's fast. And that's how come it can be so overwhelming. So we have a certain presence. And we try to give people what John Bowlby said is safe haven, comfort, a place to feel safe and seen, and a secure base, a place that they can go out from and explore difficult things, right? And we talk about health is a secure sense of self, where you can you can let your experience flow. You can process it without getting completely overwhelmed. You can turn to the greatest resource we have, which is other people, right? You have this secure sense of others, secure sense of self. You have your balance. And if you don't have that, you tend to flip into hyperarousal, where you're always vigilant, looking for danger, not trusting others, always feeling overwhelmed, right? And, overwhelmed is a good word, actually, if you listen to clients. Or if the people around you as you're growing up have been really dangerous, you learn to shut down your feelings. The issue with that is that then you don't have them as a compass in your life. And often you can't go into your emotions and you don't know what you need. You can't connect with other people. So there's a lot else I could say, but that's attachment in a nutshell. And what we do is we create safe haven, secure base.
And how do we induce that?
I induce it by attuning to my client. I induce it.
Tell us more about attune. Tell us more about what it means that you attune to your client in a way that the client can sense it and feel it.
Well, first of all, I have a map for what I'm looking for. I'll give you an example. The lady that I talk about in the primer, Henny, I have never seen PTSD scores that like this lady had. Okay. I'd never seen them. I thought, my goodness me, I don't know how this lady functions. And when she first came in, we think about levels of experiencing, whether people can go deeper into their experience and hold it and look at it and stay with it or not. When Henny first came in, she talked very, 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 very fast and very, very, very high. And she told me lots of facts that didn't fit together, right? And she'd say, my father was a pedophile, he was dangerous, and everyone was raped, my sisters were raped, and I have this terrible memory. And then she'd flash somewhere else and she'd say, I don't remember anything. I don't remember being raped. And so this was what it was like. So the whole of the first few sessions was me trying to make sense and trying to say with my voice and my presence, yes, could you help me? Could you help me understand? I hear you. Am I getting it right? You correct me. Yeah. How this is so hard. You have so much courage to come in and talk to me about this. And you don't know me, so you don't know that I'm safe, right? But this is what I hear. You help me. And gradually, she slowed down, and I started to be able to talk to her a little bit about her emotions. But to give you a feel for where she was, she said, I'll draw you a picture. I'll draw you a picture of the worst day of my life. I said, okay. She brought it in the next session, and she talked about the church. There was a church, that was all. There were no people. And I said, Henny, I'm sorry, I don't understand what happened here. There's just a picture of a church. And she said, is there? Oh, well, and it took weeks for her to actually begin to fill that picture in. So you have to go with your client's window of tolerance. You have to stay with your client. You have to validate that it's difficult for them to walk into their emotional lives. They have all the reasons in the world not to do that. And I say to myself all the time, what is it like to be this person? How am I feeling as I listen to them? What is happening with them? There's really only 6 emotions if you look at Ekman's work. And the ones that are usually problematic are all about sadness and loss, literally starvation from what we need as kids, as an attachment, sadness and loss, shame, which is all about there's something wrong with me. That's why people were so dreadful to me. There must be something wrong with me. And different levels and different kinds of fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of rejection, and existential fears. Fears like I'm alone in life. I don't mean anything to anyone. My life doesn't mean anything. As time goes by, if I do need people, I'm going to be vulnerable. I'll be alone. People will abandon me. We all have these fears. We all have these fears. And I listen to people and I point out the patterns. So, she would go for a long time and I would say, so what you're telling me is, and I pick out the core themes that she's talking about, emotional themes, how she defines herself. And what I also do, especially in EFT, We don't have to do it in couples so much because we grow them. And as we grow them, they start to be resources for each other and they grow each other. But what I also do is I look for resilience scenes and dramas. Usually I say, who made you feel safe? And they say, oh, well, my grandmother. I say, oh, could you close your eyes and could you see your grandmother's face? Yes. And could you tell her right now, Granny, this is hard to be in therapy with Sue. Part of me wants to run. I don't want to be here. Could you tell her, or something for you? And you create Granny, and you're going to use Granny, that image, all through therapy.
And I'm sure you see an affect shift right there on the spot.
Of course. And I'm creating a resource drama with Henny. I couldn't find one. I couldn't find anyone. So I said, was there ever a time in your childhood when you felt powerful? And her face lit up and she said, I'm a fantastic gymnast. But I want you to hear how this is what I mean by experiential. I don't talk about that. I go into it with her. I say, okay, first of all, she tells me about it. And I say, aha. So could you close your eyes? And I'm going to try and be there with you. And you help me. And we're going to make this alive right now. So could you, I'm going to do it fast because we haven't got much time. Okay, but I do it bloody slow. Okay. So I say, so could you help me? Your feet are on the balance beam. You can feel your feet on the balance beam. You know where it is. And you're going to jump into the air. You're going to fly. You know you can do it. And you leap and you feel your body turn and you know you're turning and you know it's perfect and you know where the beam is and you hit the beam and you feel the solidness of the beam and you throw out your arms and you leap from the beam and you did it. And she says, yes, I did it. I said, yes, you were strong and you were powerful. And I go back to that scene again and again and again when things become overwhelming for her. So you can use positive emotion, but it has to be felt. A corrective emotional experience, it's an old phrase. The issue is in our work, we know exactly what that means and we know how to create it because in our research, we can track it in couples and now with individuals, we can track it. We can say that's a hold me tight conversation right there. See those 20 interactions? That's a hold me tight conversation. We can code it. And from that, if that happens, we can predict where people will be at the end of therapy and where they'll be 3 years later. So we know that's the change event we want. So we can train therapists. This is what you're going for. You're not always going to get there. It's not always going to look exactly the same. This is what we're going for, right? And with EFIT, we're going for an interaction with self that expands the sense of self rather than cripples it.
Okay.
Oh, so that I did answer you. If you want me to talk about the tango, I will, unless you have another very interesting question.
Let's talk about the tango, and we're full of interesting things. We can go on all night.
Okay. So it's called the EFT Tango because I kept watching these brilliant therapists of mine doing therapy, and I suddenly thought, good Lord, they're all doing the same thing. And it's basically in a sequence, although it's not a formula, you know, it's labeling an alive process, right? So we started to write it down, and now we teach it as a expedited way of teaching couple therapists, family therapists, and individual therapists. It's called the Tango because when COVID isn't around, I usually dance Argentine tango about 10 hours a week. And the thing about that is it's not like Dancing with the Stars. Dancing with the Stars is boring, phony bullshit, okay? What real tango is you stand up with a perfect stranger. You're both listening to music that really gets into your nervous system, moves your body, affects you emotionally. So you have a structure, you're listening to music, and you start to change weight in silence, and you're in each other's arms, and you tune into the cues from that person's body, and you change weight. And when you suddenly hit this moment of synchrony where you're tuned in, you move. And the whole thing, the 3-minute dance, is an exquisite, improvised sharing of connection. And so it fits for me that that's a good name for therapy. It's about attunement. So what you'll see an EFT therapist do basically is you'll see an EFT therapist stay in the present and look at the drama, look at present process. the within drama, how people put their emotions together and deal with them, and the between drama, how they interact with others. And you'll say, so could you help me? I'm thinking about Alison, who I'm seeing now. Could you help me, Alison? So if I'm getting it right, what goes on with you all the time? She says, I've got PTSD. I'm not interested in the labels. Could you tell me what happens with you all the time is you're telling me you get triggered very easily. Your blood boils. But underneath that boiling blood, there's a kind of shakiness. Yeah, there's a shakiness. And you don't like that. You don't like that. So when you get that feeling of shakiness, what you do is you cut it off and you go into what you call a fog. Yeah, am I getting it right? And she says, yes, that's right. So, and in that fog, you kind of get lost in that fog. And at first it feels good, but then it doesn't. And you're kind of lost and it feels very bad. And what you have done, even as a child and even now as a young adult, is when it gets really bad, you go and bang your head on the wall to come out of the fog. She says, yes, yes. And then you go into what you call depression, where you sit on the couch and eat zoodles. I didn't know what zoodles were. I'm sure you all do. She taught me anyway. You eat zoodles. And she, yes, that's right. And I say, and you've been doing this for a long, long, long time. She says, yes, that's right. And I want to stop. I say, I understand. Now I've got the internal emotional drama that keeps her trapped, right? She doesn't know how to step out of that. And then I say, and with other people, until the man that you've just met, who you say you're starting to create trust with, which is amazing, with other people, you just saw them as dangerous. So what you would do when you'd see them, you'd either get angry with them or you'd completely shut down and shut them out. She said, yes, that was the only thing to do. I said, yeah, and then you're all by yourself, right? And her face, which is very sort of together, softens and says, yes, I'm by myself. I said, And so I'll paint that picture and I'll bring in the symptoms, which is she gets fired from jobs because she blows up all the time, right? And, you know, she's spent a lot of time depressed and she's got PTSD. And but I don't bring them in as symptoms. I bring them in as part of this process. So we zoom out and we look from a meta perspective at the person's life, how they're coping and how their emotions and their relationships have these patterns and how these ways of protecting themselves become a prison. And we look and I share with the client and the client says yes. And we use images and we repeat. So the client starts to understand their life and their personality. And then you decide things about yourself. She says, yes, I say bad things to myself, right? So we have this kind of process-orientated picture and we evolve it with the client in the present. And we are present emotionally, supporting them, holding them as they do that. That's move one of the tango. Move two is we go down and we assemble people's emotion. Literally, we say, so could you help me? When you think about this right now, what is the trigger you felt today? Oh, the trigger today was my stepmother's face. Okay. And what's the basic feeling? Well, it's just, you know, everything's dangerous, the perception. And what do you feel in your body? These are the elements of emotional processing. I know what they are. I can put them together and I can put them together with any client. And what do you feel in your body as you say this? I don't know. I don't want to feel. But well, could you help me? When I look at your face, is this a moment when you're a little bit shaky? Yeah. I feel shaky, and usually I would cut this off. You know, I just like cut this off. Like if I feel it's just going to get worse, I'll feel more. I say yes, I understand, and we stay with people's blocks.
So here's your attunement. Here's your attunement to her emotions, where that's
right, and
you're noticing her impasse or her obstacle, and you're acknowledging it right there, which in itself creates that safety. Is that right?
That's right.
Got it.
And then you talk about, and what sense does she make of it? And she says, I say bad things to myself. I say, it was my fault that my brothers all abused me. There's something wrong with me. right? And I say, and then what do you do? She says, I shut down, bang my head on the wall, get depressed, right? And so I put her emotion together, and then I go for the more core emotion, the underlying emotion. And I say, how are you feeling as you say this? And she says, and she really struggles, right? And she says, I don't know, I just feel, I guess I feel sad. I say, yes, yes. And I'll repeat that, like we sing to the amygdala, so you have to repeat things, because the first time they say something to the amygdala that's new, the amygdala says, no, sorry, scary information, don't want that. And you have to say it again and again. So the amygdala starts to say, oh, what was that? Yeah. So I say, yes, you were never safe. There was no safety. Of course you had to shut down. Of course you did. And now when we talk about this, you feel sad. Can you feel that in your body? She says, yes. So where do you feel it? So I feel it right here, right here. See, it's so hard to feel that sadness. When you help me, what else comes up for you? And she says, I don't know, something like never getting held, never getting, and somehow we come up with starved. And she says, yes, starved. And I was alone. And then we come up with silently suffering, because she never told anybody about the abuse until she was 16. And starved and silently suffering and sad are emotional handles. You can write them down and use them again and again in session after session to turn and walk into the key elements in this person's emotional life. So I write them down and I use them again and again. And as therapy goes along, we go deeper and deeper into that emotion. She explores it more, she stays with it more, she goes through it in a different way. And as she does that, she starts to trust herself, trust her experience, access that she can be strong, right? So move 2 is assembling emotion. Move 3 is taking that emotion and bringing it into making it live in a drama. So we enact it. And this is really Fritz Perls. This is Salvador Minuchin. This is, we do it in a very particular way. So, I say, she says, well, you must find this very boring. I say, aha, enact with me. Would you like to look at my face right now? What do you see in my face? Well, I don't know. Do I look bored? Well, I don't know. I say, I'm going to tell you, when I listen to you, I feel really sad right now. You do? Yeah, I do. I can't imagine all that silent suffering that you felt. I'm not sure I could have handled it. And she starts to weep, right? That's with me. Or I'll say, attachment figure. I'll say, her man now. I'll say, and in these moments when things too much, can you close your eyes and think of Nathan? Yes. Can you tell Nathan? What would you like to tell Nathan about going into these feelings? She closes, first of all, she says, I don't like closing my eyes. Why do I have to close my eyes? I say, oh, good question. Okay, well, see, I dance tango, and when I close my eyes, I can feel more. That's what happens. So, but is it too hard for you to close your eyes? Well, so I want you to try it just for a little bit. And if it's too hard, we'll stop. Okay. So she closes her eyes. Now she closes, I've done 6 sessions. She closes her eyes whenever I ask her. Okay. So close your eyes and see Nathan and tell him how hard this is. And what does he say? And I do that as a resource. Or I'll go into a difficult situation, right? Where, what did she do that was so beautiful in the last session? She had a little chat with her stepmother and said how angry she was without losing her balance. But the beautiful one she did in session 6, and we're just going to use this in a big training with Pessy. We're going to do a masterclass on EFT. The beautiful one she did was, I said to her at one point, can you see that little girl's face who was silently suffering? Who, what did she do? The one you said she used to crawl under her bed so that her brothers couldn't get her. Can you see her face? And what she started with was, no, I can't see her face. Don't want to see her face. I understand that's too hard right now, right? But in this session 6, I say, Alison, you're talking about this. I lead into it. Can you see that little girl's face right now? And she closes her eyes. And she says, yes, I can see her. And where is she? She's under the bed. And what's she doing under the bed? She's holding on to Emily, her favorite toy. I said, oh, she's holding her really tight. Yeah, now, it has to be alive. It's not a discussion, it's an experience, right? So you have to make it live. You have to go in there. You're holding on to Emily and could you help me? You're way under the bed. Yeah, I'm back against the wall, so nobody can reach me. I've got my blankie and Emily, and it's cold, and I'm by myself. Right, you're all by yourself. Yeah, you're all by yourself. And you can see her face, and you see how scared she is. Yeah, I say, right. So if you were there as the brave, strong young woman who's come to talk to me about such difficult things, as the brave, strong Alison who started to risk with Nathan, if you were there with her, will you bend down and look under the bed? Can you see her? She says, yes, I can see her. I say, good. What would you like to do? What would you like to say to her? And then you wait, because there are only so many stories. They're all about attachment, and they follow patterns. They're predictable. And she says, I crawl under the bed and I hold her. I said, and she weeps. Say you hold her as she weeps. She says, yes. And what do you say to her? She says, it's okay, I'm here now. It's okay. And I hold her. Now, this is stage 1, which is about stabilization. So I don't hold her there very long. I hold her there and I let her go, and then we talk about it and process it. And then in the next part of the tango, I validate the hell. I say, change doesn't happen in a couple of sessions. Look, we did just here. You're changing right now. Look at how you're changing. Wow, wow, wow. I validate, right? But that's stage 1, which is stabilization. If we were in stage 2, restructuring, I would stay there longer and she would stay there longer, and we'd explore it more and we'd go deeper into the feelings. And then stage 3 is consolidation. So I hope that's sort of given people a feel. And
That's the right word right there.
yeah,
Definitely, that's something we can feel. And I think
so.
I think that what you did so brilliantly was you made it experiential, almost as if there were 2 people in the room with you, and you created that experience. So it really did give us a bit of a sense. And I'm seeing a lot of chatter in the chat box about training. When can we do a training? How can we do a hold me tight training? And how can we access a Sabbath observant training? So if you have a resource for that, I would type it in the chat box, and people can reach out or search it, or we can create one.
We have 70 trainers, folks. We have about 36 in North America. Go on the ICEF site and look for trainings in EFIT and in couples and in families. They're all over the place, okay? And I do EFIT trainings with my wonderful, wonderful colleague, Leanne Campbell, who works with me. We work together in practice, and we make tapes, and there's a couple of training tapes. They're early ones. I think we're going to make better ones. I'm very critical of my work, so we're going to make better ones in the next little while. But and there's trainings all over the place. I believe Alana Katz in New York does trainings that fit with you guys' traditions and you guys' schedules, right? She's a lot into couples, but I think we can find an EFT trainer for you. I'm sure we can. And you can also see our tape sessions of me and Leanne teaching you EFIT on the ICEF site. And we've partnered with PESI a lot. And our trainings, our EFIT trainings with PESI are through the roof popular. They're people love them. I think people love them because we love doing them. And we have such fun. And we love each other, which is, you don't often see 2 presenters training who obviously love each other.
Finishing each other's sentences, right?
Yes, and supporting the hell out of each other.
Okay, so we have our first question for the night, but I do want to.
What is EFIT? That's a very good question.
Well, not that. I mean, we have a live question.
Oh,
EFIT, we're going to look up online.
Emotionally focused individual therapy.
Because we're going to start. I want to start talking about couples a little bit.
Okay.
So let's take a question from Elliot Kaplan, and then we'll jump a little bit into couples and how you induce this process in couples. I mean, what you're describing in the emotional focus technique seems very sophisticated. You have to be really grounded and you have to be very self-aware in the therapy room as the therapist to induce such a process. It seems sophisticated. And I'm wondering if we could talk a little bit about, spouse to spouse and a couple relationship and how that works. So Elliot, go ahead, ask your question and we'll jump into couples.
I can't hear him.
Yeah,
Elliot,
he's
you're
got
muted.
to unmute.
Was that?
That's
That's
it. We
good.
can hear you.
Very good. Yeah, so thank you for coming on, and it's very fascinating, and I appreciate all the ideas that you're talking about. So my question, you do a lot of Carl Rogers. I mean, I'm hearing Carl Rogers.
Yes.
Yes,
What-
yes.
What percent of your work is Carl Rogers?
That's tricky because I've been called Carl Rogers on steroids.
They got to call you Carla Rogers.
Oh, all right then. Okay, pretty good.
Not Carl.
I think Carl Rogers gave our basic understanding of experiential therapy. He said a good reflection is not a repetition, it's a revelation. But we've been doing this for 35 years now, and we've done all kinds of studies and looked at thousands of couples on tapes and now lots of individuals and families. So we've evolved. I think actually people who don't like that people who tell me I'm not Rogerian enough tell me that we intervene more than Carl Rogers did. And they're right, because if you work with couples and you have this live drama in the room, you have to be willing to follow and lead.
Another question I had, well,
Oh, hold on. I think we lost Dr. Johnson. Let's see if she signs back in. Want to work on getting her back in?